all'Accademia Americana. I am Peter Miller, the president, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this evening. I want to start with some thanks and then some other words. The thanks really to the participants whom you will have the pleasure of listening to and asking questions of soon. Christina Bauermann of Glass Osteria, Guillaume Gély of Paolo and Noemia D'Amico, Marco Cirese of Noelia Ricci, Alice Gargiulo of Noelia Ricci, and Giuseppe Motura of Sergio Motura. So, why are we here? And the answer is that a very long time ago, and then more recently, about 20 years ago, a major effort was made to restore some of these properties, to refurbish the gardens. About 17 years ago, a major effort was made to revamp the way food was produced and thought of here, the Rome Sustainable Food Project. And these two initiatives of ours, which have been ongoing for some time now, have been, in a sense, brought together. Some of you may have noticed this already in this past autumn when we organized a concert devoted to the Pines of Rome in October, and then a workshop here in this room in November devoted to the topic of the pines now in the context of the city of Rome and of the climate and the natural challenges to the pines as well. And then some others of you may have noticed that at the end of November, we planted actually several trees in our garden on the Italian National Arbor Day, and put a mission statement of our gardens up on our website. And none of this was coincidental. It's part of our desire to build on those long-standing priorities of the institution, the gardens, and food, to think about the way in which the Academy can include in its intellectual mission also the environmental arts and humanities, recognizing that the subjects that we have studied for 130 years and worked on at the Academy also give us a platform, a kind of legitimate position to speak to these issues, which are not only topics of conversation in a salon, but also are important issues for the world that we live in and that our children will live in. Some others of you may remember that at the beginning of the year, I talked about what makes an American academy in Rome, not just another foreign academy. And at the time, I tried to suggest that Emerson and Margaret Fuller and Henry David Thoreau give us a particular relationship to the city of Rome that is different from what other academies in the city offer. So today, just to finish up my remarks, I thought I would look to see what Thoreau had written in his journal for February 8th. And so I turned to February 8th, 1860, and he notes that it was 43 degrees in Walden. Today, I just checked before I came here, it's 41 degrees in Walden. He says, and I'll just read a few lines of the journal. You can find it online, as I did. 40 degrees and upward, he said, may be called a warm day in the winter. We have had much of this weather for a month past, reminding us of spring. February may be called Earine. Now, I didn't know this word, E-A-R-I-N-E, spring-like. There is a peculiarity in the air when the temperature is thus high and the weather fair at this season, which makes sounds more clean and pervading, as if they trusted themselves abroad further. In this genial state of the air, different sounds come to my ear now from the iron rails which are struck, as from the cawing crows, etc. Sound is not abrupt, piercing, or rending, but softly sweet and musical. It will take a yet more genial and milder air before the bluebird's warble can be heard. And then he goes on to describe the ice that he walks over on the pond and the different things caught in the pond. I'm not going to read it to you, though. It is absolutely charming and completely unique. So I'll just bring you to the end. He's describing the color of the water under the ice in Walden Pond. He says, the proper color of water is perhaps best seen when it overflows white ice. Pliny could express a natural wonder. About on an old boat frozen in, I see a great many little gyrans-shaped bugs swimming about in the water above the ice. And that's how he ends, and that's how I'm going to end. I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Welcome, everyone. One of the greatest pleasures I have of being the director of the American Academy in Rome is that I get to eat the best food in the world. And it's prepared every single day, and I'm the most spoiled person ever. And in fact, our fellows always ask me, how am I ever going to go back to real life where scones don't magically appear in cabinets? Today we had a squash and kale soup that was to die for, and it just magically appeared in pots. And we are served Monday through Friday a 3-course meal, tableside, right, where we have the freshest greens, we have the most wonderful fruit, and we have, in this case, for our Rome Sustainable Food Project chefs, the most creative chefs ever who can, because we eat sustainably, because we eat by season, the most creative ways of showing how cabbage can be cooked every single day for about 3 months straight. And it never appears in quite the same way. But we are truly privileged. And we are even more privileged here not to only have our 3 Rome Sustainable Food Project chefs with us, but also world-renowned chef Christina Bowerman, who So Christina's absolutely amazing. She happens to be the favorite chef of my son, Luca, who is now at Harvard. But Christina's also one of my favorite people because I'm from Texas and she actually trained in Austin. So we've got a Texas connection going on. But beyond that, she is the first woman chef in the city of Rome to earn a Michelin star. She is the creative voice and executive chef of Glass Osteria. She is not only a rock star chef who has incredible taste and served as a taste ambassador for the Milan Expo, for the World Expo that was in Milan, but she's also someone who is now turning, I think, a new leaf for chefs everywhere in the world. Because chefs are not only relegated to the kitchen. Chefs do not have to stay in their lane, much like doctors do not need to stay in their lane when we talk about gun control and we talk about safety. Chefs also have a voice to talk about food scarcity, sustainability, human rights, social justice, and the right of every single soul on this on this planet to actually have sustenance, to have good food, to have healthy food, to have nutritious food, and to have food that feeds not only their bodies, but feeds their soul. And so Christina here today with our RSFP chefs, I think speak to a new generation of cooks, or not even a new generation of cooks, a generation of cooks that's now finally being recognized as being more than just people who wield their craft in the kitchen, but are understanding that food is about more than just putting nutrients in the body, but about regeneration of agriculture, regeneration of conversation, regeneration of spirit, of creativity, and of what, as Alice Waters said when she helped us design the Rome Sustainable Food Project 17 years ago, what brings us back to the table. And it is what brings us to the table that is so important that we can have conversations like this today. So I want to start, and you all have a microphone, except for me and Faust who have to share. Exactly. I'm going to start with Sara Levi. You were here, you've been the Rome Sustainable Food Project chef for the longest here. And you have heard Alice Waters speak many, many times about the philosophy of the Rome Sustainable Food Project. What is it that we are trying to do in our kitchen?
Okay. Thank you. I guess that's a great place to start. So there are many things we're trying to do, and I think whenever I address interns, I try to think back to what I learned from Alice, what I continue to learn from Alice. She comes back to visit us every year, and And her teachings are just incredible and timeless. So we want to create an environment, a healthy, safe environment where the community of the American Academy can just take a break in their day and slow down for a moment and have a nice meal in good company and share their ideas and just let that magic happens when you're relaxed and you let your guard down and you sit down to a beautiful meal and just start talking. And so that is our mission here. And at the same time, we are here to educate our interns. We have the most incredible internship program. We're very fortunate to have this, and I just care so deeply for this program. I started myself as an intern 12 years ago, and as did Georgia 7 years ago. And and it was a life-changing experience for me. I was transitioning out of an arts career that was just not, it was not working out for me. I was getting more and more interested in food, and I was already living in Rome. So when I discovered that this project existed, I was over the moon, and I was lucky enough to become an intern, and it was really a pivotal moment in my life. And so, I mean, for me, the opportunity to be able to continue that with all of our interns every year is priceless. So what makes this project so special is that everything we do, everything we think about every day about the food that we prepare, we do it having to explain to our interns the reason behind our choices. And when you have to explain to interns why you decided to cook a certain dish, I think it just makes everything much more meaningful, much more profound. So we have the opportunity to plant that seed in young cooks who then leave this place after a few months and go out into the world and do their thing, and it's very exciting to see everything that they're doing beyond the walls of this academy. For instance, we've got a couple who just got hired as co-chefs at Massimo Bottura's Refettorio in London. And I think that's a good example of how interns will take what they learn here. And of course, even in their previous experience, I mean, all of them have just such interesting backgrounds. And then they take that and they bring it with them in whatever it is that they do. And this is what Alice taught us, among many other things, is to really take that responsibility very seriously. And so it creeps into every decision that we make, whether it's, how to cook a cabbage today, or just, what to harvest in the garden, and so on and so forth.
So I think what's very interesting also to me is that, you start off in an arts career and found food. And Christina, you started off as a lawyer. You actually finished a law degree, went on to study, to do legal studies in San Francisco, and ended up in food. And now some of that legal knowledge, I think, is also infusing your work as an advocate, as an activist. Why have you chosen this new path of, beyond making beautiful food, of also becoming an advocate for human beings all over the world, of having the right to sustenance, to having the right to survival, to having the right to nutrition, to having the right to sustainability?
Yep. Well, thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me here. It's such a great honor. I live not far away from here, and I had many friends who stayed here in the past, and I know about your garden. I've known about your garden all along, because one of the first things that I did when I came here was to actually contact you and say, hey, can I please use your garden or use your vegetables? And you said, no, this is for the academy. I said, okay. So first of all,
Ask
thank you.
again, Christina.
Yeah. But in reality, in between law and cooking, there are 10 years of graphic design. And I think it's my approach to creativity in general that brought me to, to a transition that almost felt natural. From graphic design, I thought, I can express my creativity better through food than not, a computer screen. But that doesn't mean that I didn't like it. I did like it. And everything that I learned throughout my life, honestly, helped me out to be who I am today. I always say that life is like an empty backpack, and as you go along, you fill it up. And then there will be one day in which you are in the middle of the road, and you say, oh, I'm thirsty. You pick it up, your water from the backpack. And I think that's exactly what happened. But since I was a kid, and that's a matter of personality, I'm the first of 3 kids. I've always been, the one that kind of dictated the rules. I'm a little bit assertive, in my sister's words. So I always wanted to make a difference. I always ask myself, how can I leave this earth trying to make a difference, even in one person's life? For me, it is very important, because I wanted to fill up my life with something meaningful. And I didn't think that just having a job, making good money, because, I've always sustained myself by myself, was not enough. So I always searched for things to do that were outside of my profession, using my profession. So, it's too long of a list, but I'm old, yeah. I am, because people always like me, always look at me and said, how old are you? I'm like, I'm old. And when it came down to food, one of the first things, probably because I lived in Austin for such a long time, that made a huge difference in the approach that I had to food and life in general. Austin is a hippie city, Birkenstock city, laid-back city, I don't know. So there were restaurants, I'm talking about back in '96, they already had their garden in the back, and they, even in my university, we had a garden. We raised, we farmed, and we picked up vegetables, herbs, and so on. And for me, it was quite a natural approach. So when I came here, I noticed that one of the very huge problems was actually food coming to the city. And still today, I say that one of the biggest problems of, restaurant vendors and so on, are the ones in the city, not the ones that are outside of the city. I always say it's easy. You open the door, you pick up your rosemary, your mint, your herbs, and so on. But in the city, actually making sure that the food that gets to both grocery stores and then restaurants is good is a very difficult thing, and that involves logistics. Involving logistics, that means basically that you need to intervene at a legislative level. You have to communicate with political figures in order to help you out. And in fact, one of the things that makes me very happy that you're talking about food, and finally you invited chefs. Because most of the time, political figures, they talk about food, they talk about how it is important to do this, this, and this, and then at the table, there's nobody who actually is in the food industry or business. So they come up with these great ideas that are impossible to actually realize. So I started to get involved, and you said I'm an activist. Yes, I'm actually one of those people that picks up, things that are interesting, and I follow them, I study them. So I made a small list while I was waiting for the conference to start, because otherwise I would start talking and I never stop. That's another thing my sister says, you never shut up. So the other day I was nominated, for instance, ambasciatrice delle buone pratiche, because I've been collaborating with Professor Segre of University of Bologna on an application. This application actually started for private people on how to avoid waste. And one of the things that kind of caught my attention, and then when I spoke with Professor Segre, was very interesting, is that it's not a coercive behavior. So basically, if you do that, you have to do this, like the law about the doggy bag. If you don't give the doggy bag, you're going to get fined. It is actually a virtual community that builds itself on good behavior. So you kind of inspire people to do better. So with Professor Segre, actually, we enlarged this application, Lo Sprecometro, to restaurants. Even though restaurants is very well known that waste way less than private people, but nevertheless, it is a field that you can improve. So about 3 years ago, I started at my restaurant a process to become plastic free. I'm only at the 3rd level out of 5. people would say, why do you do that? I'm like, well, because you need to do something. Because if everybody complains and everybody is afraid of what's gonna happen, in the future, and you do nothing, even a small step, we're just gonna get worse and worse. At this point, I want to just say something. I haven't watched the entire Sanremo, of course, but I've watched it about 1 hour the first night and maybe half an hour yesterday. But one of the things that I noticed is about songs and the theme. The theme of the songs are always sad. It's almost like the future generations, the younger generations, are afraid, uncertain, and they think that everything is going to go just to waste, let's say it this way. I noticed that almost every song, there's not one song that kind of like sing happiness, nothing. Everybody is afraid. And so that is one of the reasons for which, independent from the fact that you're young, old, that you have kids or not, I think that each of us have to do a small thing in order to make sure that the world changes. This plastic-free certification, just to make sure, doesn't give me anything. As a matter of fact, it cost me I don't know, about 15,000 more per year, just like that. Nobody gives me any prize. But I do it because I believe, and a lot of my colleagues actually started to get interested, because whenever I started to talk about it, they said, oh, let me understand, how does it work? What should I do? Then Chef's Manifesto. Chef's Manifesto is an international organization. Paul Newham is the founder. It's absolutely on volunteer base. And it's extremely interesting because, of course, it is a SDG hub connected to the United Nations that works on and Hunger Now and on those 16 points suggested by the UN. We work on nutrition. So, for instance, every year we have a theme. And what we do is that we communicate to people. We communicate through reels, through tweets, through anything. And sometimes we get together for, events. We, for instance, put recipes online. We give them to them, and they help us out to diffuse them, to communicate with the public. This year, and for the last year and a half, we concentrated ourselves on beans. Because, for instance, one of the things that it's very noticeable on every Italian's tables is that nobody cooks legumes anymore. And legumes are not only a regenerative ingredient, but also perfect for farmers, rotations, and so on, but also extremely nutrition, a gigantic substitute most of the time, not completely, to traditional proteins, which actually reflects our Mediterranean diet. When I say our, I don't intend Italian. I don't mean that at all. I mean, like, let's say that Mediterranean could be, I don't know, balanced diet. Every single, dietitian, medical experts, expert in nutrition, they say that diet is balanced. Whereas we completely turned it around and we eat regular proteins because probably they're easier, because probably they're faster, but we have completely neglected legumes. So every year, for instance, last year was the year of the millet. This year is the year of the legumes, and our slogan is "Beans is how." Yeah, it's cool. Then, I've been founder and president of Ambasciatori del Gusto, which is a national association, and one of the projects, I did two important projects. One was actually the first scientific study on the psychological effects on work. So we did the first one with the Order of Psychologists. And so balanced life and so on. That is one thing, but the most important one that concerns nutrition is Adopt a Farmer, which was actually very, very good and efficient through the pandemic. Because basically, I pick up a farmer, local, that we should define actually what local means in Italy, because for me, local could be even somebody from Liguria, for instance. But we pick one ingredient, we pick one farmer, we communicate with everybody, and we talk about one ingredient. For instance, mine is trombolotto. There are a bunch of people, even from Lazio, they don't even know what trombolotto is. My farmer is Fabio Stivali and Angela Concu. They are actually two. And I use it at a restaurant, paying for it, which is very important because most of the time, whenever you go into restaurants and people become testimonial, that means you don't pay for your product, but that is not fair, especially during the pandemic was very evident. So I pay for it, and I'm obliged to put it in my menu. But that is not an agreement. I mean, he cannot take me to court if I don't, but it's just something that is important. So if a lot of people started to do that, and it was a good way to communicate. And finally, so I already bothered you, I know that. The question that I ask myself all the time, which is actually the most concrete and essential one. As a chef, what can I do? And not only as a chef, you should ask yourselves, as a bank employee, as a teacher, as whatever profession, as a writer, as a tour operator, or no, tour operator is actually, can I define you that? Okay. What can I do? And it is extremely important that each of us own what we do, and we make sure to take that little step to change the reality in front and around us. That's the way we change the world. Look at the tractors, the protests. It will always go back to that. It will always go back to the roots. And so political figures and so on, they should exploit us. They should actually consult us. We should have a permanent technical table with them to talk about what we can do to help in communication and in operation. I could talk more, but I can see people are sleeping.
No. I mean, I think it's really interesting when you're talking about kind of like bringing voices to the table, because in fact, that is it. I mean, you can have scientists, you can have politicians, you can have, farmers, right? Producers, but you also need the people who are consuming the food, and you need the people who are actually making the food as well. Fausto, you actually trained in the slow food movement, right? And then you went to the United States, and for 15 years you were with Felice restaurants, opening up different restaurants, and you trained in slow food in Italy and Rimini, and then you went to the United States where we waste 80 million tons of food a year. 38% of the food produced in the United States gets thrown away. And then you come back to Rome, to the Rome Sustainable Food Project, where we are trying to throw away as little as possible, where we recycle as much as we possibly can, where we take the roots, the leaves, the fruits, the berries, everything we can, and reimagine it as something that is edible and nutritious. How does that flip come for you? From working in New York City, where you see bags and bags and bags of waste in the street, to coming to a place where we try to mulch everything. We try to encourage people not to drink water out of plastic bottles, where we try to regenerate everything as we are regenerating our souls at the table.
Thank you, Lisa, for the question. That's exactly why I came back, because there was a moment that after 15 years, even maybe earlier, I couldn't really understand why I was doing that job in that way, which in a sort of American way to think, business-wise, maybe it can make sense, but not in mine. So I had this wish to come back and to start again with the roots that I know. So it was the slow food movement that I know very, very well, because I started with this small restaurant in Appennino Tosco, Romagnolo, and we were one of the few to have the 3 snails, and was amazing to go and foraging and living like very simply with this family. It was great time. So that was in my mind, stuck in my soul. And then I decided to go back, because even that, when I say, okay, let's go back to Italy, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna work for a restaurant? And I didn't feel really comfortable, because I thought, in my mind I said, maybe you go from one problem to another problem. So I decided, then the chance was to come here, and I read about the program and everything. I know Alice Juarez and the Japanese, and so I said yes. That's the place that where, if I have to come back, I have to go and have to apply, and I was lucky enough to be chosen. Waste in US, it's really a big problem in my point of view. We were doing we were going through, like COVID, for example, one of the latest, and we were just justify prices, like making bigger portions and not making sense, and just get rid of some kind of food that was too expensive, and everything was sounding so bad. And I said, this is not the way to go. I think it comes even from the, I went back from the 80s when I was starting my career. And then I said, it was the era of the consumism, we call it. So where everything was made to be, you need this, you need that. Your needs become to be like 10 things to 100 things. And they make you feel believable that you believe that you needed a cell phone, you believe you needed the special wine that's super expensive, and I'm just throwing things random. But I think it's the moment now that we reach to go back, to stop. And what we're doing here is try to help this kind of mentality to go back and make the life simpler. Cooking simple with one, as you said, with one piece, one produce, we can make tons of recipes, tons. And you know, like especially now that we have like a cover by brassicace, and it's just cauliflower and broccoli, and cabbage. And so we need to come out with very special recipes because every day with the fellows, we are lucky enough that we can make whatever we want because they can't choose. So. So we try to be as inventive and creative as possible. And all of us in the kitchen with the interns as well, we really do special things. I'm very lucky to be here. It's a very special place and make me feel good. When I go home, I feel good because I did my job. We fed people, we fed fellows that they hang out together and they bring creativity together and they realize that, I don't know, maybe I can communicate to you with the other, and then they go together. And this is beautiful because I think it creates a new step, a new level. So they come as a fellow, as a own prize, and maybe they go back with something more. And they know this is happening even because they sit down at the table and in front of a very good and healthy food and a good glass of wine. This is much easier to achieve.
So I think for those of you who aren't members of the Academy, one of the things that you need to know is that we have our lunch at 1 and our dinner at 8. So we do keep Italian times, which I think for some of our American fellows, just like, eat at 8 o'clock. That's when, the sitcoms are coming on, right? But we get used to it very quickly. And not only that, the better the food is at the table, the longer we actually stay at the table. And so there are often times when we are nearing the completion of dinner, we're finishing, the waitstaff are trying to clear up because they also want to eat and they want to go home, and the fellows are still sitting at the table. They're still talking, they're still enjoying, they're having another glass of wine, they're lingering over the beauty of the table that is not just the food, but the conversation that it brings. And so we're very, very fortunate here. Because as Fausto was saying, and as Sara is saying, what we're doing here is not just kind of training our interns, but we're also educating, as Christina's doing, the wider public about what it means to consume and what it means to eat. Giorgia Lauri has been doing that in a very different way because she was not only an intern in the kitchen, and then she has now become our sous chef in the kitchen. She actually volunteers her time both here and in other countries to bring food and to bring the conversation to the table, to bring political, social justice, human rights issues actually to the forefront as well. So you work very closely with Caseta Rosa. You have worked with different agencies. You have been working with Mediterranea, because in bringing that food to the table, you are also talking about people who don't get to eat, people who don't have that guarantee that there will be food on the table the next day, people who don't have familiar things that are provided to them, and who need much more than just the food on their table in order to survive. What have you been doing in order to help those people?
Hard, probably not enough. But I think I was brought up thinking that we move through life as political being. And I think cooking is a very radical act. And I started cooking 10 years ago out of a small container in a urban garden in London, with a community of Bangladeshi women in an area that was like 5 minutes away walking from one of the richest part of London in King Cross. And we would cook on Saturday afternoon, and the women would come and ask me all these questions on how to make curries and dishes I never made before because my background was very different. And they would just come back to cook together. And soon enough, we built a community. And I've been lucky enough to work with many different people in the last 10 years that told me that when you build community is when you start making the change, and there is so much building community around tables. And food security is not just security in terms of quantity of food or quality of food, but it's also about our well-being as humans and how much of our identity is connected to it. There is so much often shame in queuing for having access to food. And I think what we're trying to do as cook with the Mediterraneo Casetta Rossa around Rome, and in part is like with this project in cooking sustainable food, is to create little networks of community where people feel free that they have the access to it. And especially in Rome, I've been collaborating with Casetta Rossa, which is in Garbatella, Municipio Ottavo, where the idea is to build a community kitchen for people to come and cook and share their own recipe. And I think there is so much sustainability in that, and it's very, very important to be able to work locally in our own capacity to open up our kitchen to members of community.
So tomorrow is what is New Year's Eve for the Lunar New Year. And so tomorrow at the American Academy, we're actually celebrating Lunar New Year. And I think last year was the first year we ever did that, right? And I came to the chefs and I said, I'd really like to, it's one of my traditions, I'd really love to celebrate Lunar New Year. And we were trying to figure out how you do that sustainably. And Georgia knew, like where to go in the market because there are immigrant communities. Even though we have this mythology of the old world in Italy, in fact, we are a nation also of immigrants, but also of immigrants now, of refugees, of people, italiani senza cittadinanza. We have people who are talking about what identity means. And so she knew exactly where to go to find the person who sells gailan, or the person who sells like bok choy. And then we had Tina Kanchemi, who you'll hear from in the next session, who has a tofu guy, right? Who is making organic tofu here in Rome. So I think also the idea of sustainability and of what is native, right, to Italy has changed because demographically we have changed. So Christina, when you talked about discovering the academy and you coming here and asking, hey, can I get some of your vegetables, right? I'd love for you and Sara to have a little conversation because Sara, in fact, works very, very closely with our gardeners, with our RSFP garden in kind of deciding what vegetables to grow, how to grow them, what are the best ways to grow things. And I know that you two over email have been having a really interesting conversation about genetically modified foods, which in the United States, one of the reasons why we can throw away 38% of our food is because we're producing so much because we're genetically modifying things. But when we're talking about producing enough, what does sustainable actually mean? What does genetically modified actually mean? What does organic actually mean? What does regenerative actually mean for two chefs and for someone who actually is looking at what is local and what is 0 kilometer?
You want to answer first? You want to go first? So they're going to shoot you first?
Yes, these are all questions that that we do think about. And I personally was very, very influenced by a book that I read a few years ago by Masanobu Fukuoka. It's called The One Straw Revolution, and it's a small little book, and it was written by this Japanese farmer philosopher who it's really powerful, and I definitely recommend that you all check it out, and you can read it in a day. So essentially what he says is, in a nutshell, that farming needs to go back to what it used to be, which is a sustainable lifestyle of farming, where we're not killing ourselves from the crack of dawn till sundown, plowing and weeding and maintaining our land. Our land knows how to take care of itself. Okay, and a gardener or a farmer should not be a slave to his land. A farmer should work happily away on his land and then have a nice sandwich sitting under the shade of the trees, take a nap, and then go home and then start over the next day. And how do you achieve this? By leaving the land alone and letting it take care of itself. That is essentially the principle of regenerative agriculture, which is what we're trying to practice in our tiny little garden in our backyard. So so I had many conversations with Andrea, the gardener, about this, and we over the years have just really, really cut back on the work that we do in the sense of just encouraging that natural stratification of the top layer of the soil, which is the most important layer of the soil. And the plants have been just so incredibly vibrant. We've had bigger and bigger harvests. So evidently it works. And that's one, I think, really important thing that we've learned in the last few years. The other one is a more recent discovery that I've made, which I'm super excited about, which is the concept of the evolutionary populations of wheat in particular. And I was lucky enough to visit some farms in Le Marche a few months ago where they are growing these. And this is not GMO, but it is something that is born in a lab thanks to a very interesting and incredibly talented Italian agronomist, a plant geneticist and agronomist named Salvatore Ciccarelli, who has been working in developing countries for 40 years now to develop these. Basically, what they do is they take all these different varieties of wheat, some modern and some more ancient. They cross them all together in a lab. So it's not modified, they're just crossed to have many different phenotypes of the same, of these different varieties of the same species, which is wheat. Okay, we're talking about bread wheat, so grano tenero. And it's as if you took all these different seeds, mixed them up in a bag, shake, 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 and then sow in your lands, and then you just sow all these different seeds, and then these beautiful wheat fields come up. And I was lucky enough to walk through one of these wheat fields, and I got goosebumps from the beauty of it. We're talking about promoting biodiversity, which is one of the biggest crises that we're facing right now is the loss of biodiversity. So we're talking about a very biodiverse mix of wheats, and you can see when you look at them up close, you have some that are tall, some that are short, some that are rusty colored, some have whiskers, some don't. And besides being beautiful and making a very interesting, let's say, final product that is going to ultimately reflect the terroir in which it's grown. So similarly to what you think about when you're going wine, you also end up with a plant that with your crop of wheat that works with climate change, because it's very, very resistant to drought, and it's also very resistant to weeds, and it's very resistant to pests. Excuse me. And we got some seeds on this trip. I got some seeds, and we have 2 beds in our garden that are now have wheat plants that are about this high. They're very beautiful, and we're going to be harvesting them in June. So these are some things
Yeah.
I'm excited about.
Well, I don't know. I have very mixed feelings, but I'm going to start with the GMO. Yes. We've been eating wheat in Italy, modified GMO, so genetically modified since 1942, and nobody turned into ET. So that means, like Dario Bressanini says, a molecule is a molecule and has no memory. So I do believe that we should investigate the reason for which GMO exists. There are some that involves, for instance, corn, that have been made to resist to one of the most powerful pesticides. Now, that's the wrong reason. We should find alternative for corn? Yes. Could the insect be the next corn for animals? Yes. But there are many, many GMOs that will save millions of lives. I had the opportunity of actually listening and serving food to Bill Gates just a couple of weeks ago here in Rome. And I, of course, I got more interested, not in Bill Gates as the founder of Microsoft, but as the founder, one together with Melinda, for the foundation. And I went to actually see what they do. And they finance, labs all over in order to save lives. I had the opportunity of cooking one of the rice with the highest protein content and the lowest glycemic index, which will save lives. I had the opportunity of actually cooking American potatoes or yams that have like particular content that is lower in sugar, or for instance that tilapia, a fish that is genetically modified but can resist to climate change and so on. So on one hand, the paradox of nutrition, we should quit eating so much. And we should do probably a little more exercise, whether it's in the garden or otherwise. And that's a problem, with the Western civilization. On the other hand, we cannot ignore that there's another side of the world which will suffer, because they're saying that climate change will actually separate the world in two parts. The rich, everybody will be poorer, but the rich will be way richer as opposed to the poor. So it is our duty to investigate on how to solve this problem and to look at alternatives. And that's why I'm not against GMO. But I always wonder why people want to create some kind of whatever it is, if to produce more or to actually protect the soil and to deliver more food to people who need it. One last thing I wanted to say, and now I forgot. There was about GMO. I forgot. I wanted to say one last thing about this, but just slipped out of my mind. Sorry.
It's okay. If you think of it, you can interrupt. Yeah. So in our garden, we fight different types of animals as well, right? Because I think one of the biggest pests that we have are those green parrots that live here on the Gianicolo. And so one of the things I know that when Climavore, actually you had the opening reception here, you also developed some new recipes in order to talk about, okay, we're trying to save our plants. So maybe some are resistant to pesticides, or some are resistant to different kinds of climate change. We're just trying to resist green parrots here every once in a while. And so you all did also do a green tomato kimchi, right? You did different types of things that respond to the issues that we are fighting today, right? So what are some of the ways that the Rome Sustainable Food Project Kitchen has responded to the different types of things over these past 17 years that we have had to deal with?
Well, we try to fight the waste in so many ways. Now, on the top of my mind, I can't even I'm gonna everything mix up, because every time when we start talking to waste, when we start thinking about waste, we start watching the produce. When the produce come in the kitchen, so that's the moment when we start saying, okay, what can be not removed from this piece? And as you said, yes, we try to have everything and to transform everything possible, even with the classic technique now, then pickling or fermenting. And we were trying it over and over. The other day, one of our interns, she just showed us how to ferment old bread and to create a new kind of drink. And it was fantastic. It was fantastic. And so when we try to think about waste, it's connecting with what she just said. So it's true that we have produce, and we have to think about that many people have now suffered from famine, or we have a scarcity of food. But I wanted to connect again to what I was saying before. So we went too far, in my opinion. So we started, we reached this point when everything started growing, and the needs became too many. And then when we start to have problems to handle the situation. So we have to restart again to think simple. We have to restart to take one produce at a time, one thing at a time, reconsider what we're doing, and little by little restart. And what we are doing here at the RSAP, besides teaching a new recipe, is to plant that seed to the person that is going to then multiply and then go outside the walls of Rome and then do something about in a more international way.
That's, I remembered.
Please.
That I think that this kind of feeling is if you travel a lot and you go around countries, and I've been in places where people literally don't have shoes, they follow you, begging you for your shoes, they don't have food and so on. This recurrent thought, it's always in the back of my mind. So when I see waste, or when I see just people overeating, or when I am literally bombarded with like diet advertisement, the only thing that I can think of is like, we are wasting everything. For us, it's like, yeah, I can have food anytime. And then I think of them, and I feel really sick. And one last thing, I really hope that one of the tools that people will use in the future, because everybody's been talking about AI and so on, is to actually reveal what the truth is. Because sometimes there are like a lot of advertisement about how great and green this energy source is, how great and green this will solve the problems of the world. Then actually, if you investigate, you realize that there's probably more, poison, there's more pollution for the production of something that looks green, but it's not green. And so I really hope that at least in this matter, AI can help us out to have found out the truth quickly and for sure.
So when we put this panel together, Christina, of course, is used to being an advocate and did a TEDx, 2 TEDx talks, I believe, right? And it's done a number of things. But my RSFP chefs were like, we're used to being back of the house, right? Like we're used to being in the back of the kitchen and not the ones who speak up on things. And I think one of the people who was most nervous was actually Georgia, even though Fausto said today that he was more nervous than my 2 women chefs were, right? And Georgia, you were one of the most nervous because I think you're used to being the sous chef, right? Like, being there, supporting, doing everything. And yet you are necessarily front of house when you're working in these cooking campaigns, in bringing the message forward about human rights and about the ways in which through food you can communicate the necessity of fighting and advocating for people who are marginalized, minoritized, who don't have enough. So in sitting on this panel and hearing everybody talk, has it given you also more courage not just to cook behind the scenes, but to actually step forward and speak for these people for whom you advocate so frequently?
Well, I think that there is so much advocating and also being behind the scene. And I think you can learn it from who works the land. And I think there is so much to do behind the kitchen. And I feel like it's nice sometimes to leave the talk to who can do it. And sometimes I've been pushed to another occasion to speak, and I think a part of it, Christina, it's very good at it, and also, thank you. No, and I think, it's hard because there is this idea of society that one has in mind, and very hard to achieve, and it's true that we're going through a situation, especially with climate change, as a threat multiplier, which means that the poorer you are, the harder it's going to hit you. And I collaborate with the Mediterranean that goes out at sea to help refugees coming. And in 2020, it's the first time that climate refugees were acknowledged. So you can leave your country if climate change and crisis are so terrible that you cannot live there anymore. And that's true in Afghanistan with too much water. It's true in Bangladesh where you cannot work the land anymore. And if you look at it, there is a good chance that by 2050, a third of Bangladesh won't even be livable anymore. And yeah, I think similar is like, what can you do in your everyday life? How can you be present? What you can do in your life as a cook? It's you start by looking at ways as we cook, as we grow the land, to be more sustainable. And at the same time, you also want to answer to the need of food for people that don't have access to it. And yeah, sometimes I also feel very sad and I wonder what's the solution is. And hopefully, you know, talking about it and having more people that discuss this, more people that are present, more people that are up for discuss how we can imagine a system or society where refugees are welcome, where, you know, the land I walk in is the same you walk in, and freedom is essential and for everyone. And I think, yeah, start from cooking. I feel way more confident behind the stoves, but I think it's a good way of understanding. Christina said at the beginning, it doesn't matter what you do. You can be a cook, you can be a taxi driver, you can be wherever you want, but there are ways you can collaborate into an idea of society that I like to believe in.
Cooking is powerful.
It is absolutely powerful. And I'm very proud of you for like speaking up, because I know that Georgia was so nervous. So we are going to allow the chefs to go upstairs, because in order to do the third part of this, because we're going to move to a wine panel, but in order to do the third part, which is the pairings of the food and the wine, our chefs actually have to go upstairs and cook. So you will be able to find them upstairs afterwards with the food and wine pairings, and you'll be able to ask them further questions. But we are going to shift out of the food panel now into the wine panel so that we can continue the conversation about where we go from here. So thank you very much, Christina, Sara, Giorgia, and Fausto.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to introduce our winemakers this evening. My name is Tina Canchemi. I am the Programs Associate for Special Events and Events here at the American Academy in Rome. I'm also a certified sommelier with the Associazione Italiana Sommelier since 2007. So I'd like to introduce first Giuseppe Mottura, who is the son and founder of Sergio Mottura, who owns and operates their 90-acre winery situated in Civitella d'Agliano in Lazio, which is nestled right on the border with Umbria. Renowned for their range of 10 organic labels, which include spumante, whites, reds, and a dessert wine, they are most celebrated for their white wines crafted from the native Grechetto grape variety, notably the Poggio della Costa, which we'll have the pleasure of tasting tonight. Originally from Piedmont, the Mottura family has been making wines in Lazio for almost 100 years, and since the 60s under Sergio's unique vision. They were also trailblazers in the production of the very first Metodo Classico sparkling wine in the Lazio region. Then we have Guillaume Gelli, the winemaker and enologist at Paolo e Noemia D'Amico Winery in Castiglione in Teverina, which is a neighboring organic winery just a few kilometers away from Sergio Mottura's, established in 1985. Born and raised in Alsace, France, in an agricultural family, Guillaume studied winemaking in Burgundy, then traveled the world making wines. He joined Paolo e Noemia D'Amico in 2011. Their 8 labels are predominantly crafted from French grape varieties, including their acclaimed Chardonnay Calanchi di Vaiano, which we'll also be tasting this evening. Paolo and Noemia D'Amico have been supporting the American Academy in Rome for many, many years, and we thank them for their generous contribution of wine for the McKim Gala, which will take place this June at Villa Aurelia. And finally, we have Marco Cirese and Alice Gargiullo of Noeria Ricci Winery in Emilia-Romagna, and they are winemakers committed to the revitalization of their native grape Sangiovese di Predappio. They launched their project in 2010 within Marco's family's historic Pandolfa estate, which spans over 350 acres at the foot of the Tuscan Emilian Apennines. Today, as fourth-generation winemakers, Noeria Ricci continues its journey of excellence and innovation with 3 signature labels featuring the Sangiovese di Predappio as well as the Trebbiano, grown on their 25-acre vineyard. So tonight, while we celebrate these three award-winning wineries for their commitment to environmental sustainability, we also want to question and challenges that climate change presents to responsible farming practices and evolving consumer demands. So I was going to start the conversation or ask Giuseppe, in thinking about organic certification and what that really means. You were one of the earliest in Lazio to obtain organic certification in 1996. But today, organic certification doesn't necessarily guarantee use of renewable energy in your farms, responsible water use, or even environmentally sustainable packaging. So how do you define sustainability within the context of your winemaking production practices?
Okay.
It's a big question.
Yes, we start our organic farming in 1991 when the first European legislation come out. So the Europeans started the first legislation in that period, and my father decided to start his farming, his organic farming. And the reason of this was only because his private home was in the middle of the vineyard. He were very bored about the spray of chemical product in the vineyard, so he decided to change life, to change his kind of farming, but change his kind of life around his land. And after 30 years of organic certification, we are proud about this choice of my father. But now the question is another. The question is if the organic farming is sustainable. So it seems a paradox of this, no, the organic, but it's not this because if you think about the requirement of the organic legislation, you see that the only idea, the only goal that this certification look for is the defense of the soil. So what we are doing for many years is only to defend the land. For this, no chemical product, no pesticide. But in this moment, this kind of idea of sustainability is not enough for us. Because now it's not only the defense of soil, the criteria that we look for, but there are other pillars in our kind of farming. The other pillars are, for example, the environmental requirement. For example, okay, we defend the soil, but how much CO2 gas we put in the atmosphere? So it's enough to defend the soil and then put in the atmosphere a lot of different, a lot of quantity of CO2. So there is a compromise between the two things. And the other pillar is the social pillar. Okay, we are organic, but for example, in the last vintage, in the last season, vintage 2023, we lost the 70% of our production. So there is a problem of profit for the winery. This is not only a problem of money for the owner of the farm, but it's also a problem for the employer of our farm, because we can't guarantee in this year a salaries for all our employer. So this gives us other question to the problem of the organic and the sustainability. So for this, our idea, our consideration today is that the organic certification is old, is an old concept. And so we have to go, how we say, forward us and think about a new certification. And this kind of certification is in there are a lot of this kind of certification, sustainability certification, that give an idea more complex and full idea about how a farm is sustainable for the environmental and sustainability for the social community where we live. So our future is to abandon the organic certification and see for a new kind of standard, of schema of certification.
When speaking of climate change, we of course recognize that climate change is rapidly also reshaping the wine industry, with viticulture becoming fast-growing agricultural sector in certain parts of the world, non-Mediterranean as well. And there's a lot of talk about making wines in the UK. But yet also historically, wines have always been made in hot climates, Sicily, Jordan. Specifically about the local and native grapes, Marco, do you see or how have, in your region, these grapes been adapting or not to climate change in extreme weather events? And what does this mean eventually for the hundreds of indigenous grapes that are traditionally grown in Italy?
It's a very difficult question for me because I'm a kid of this wine business. I started 2013, my first vintage. So I have just 10 years of my life. I've seen a big change because in the last 5 years I've noticed how the climate change affect on agriculture. So from 2019 to the last 5 years, we've seen extreme events like drought, frost, and in 2023, the flood in Romagna was really hit violently Romagna. And so I realized that we were facing a new era, and for us it's very complicated to manage the soil. And I decided to focus on indigenous vine, because my aim at the beginning was to valorize the terroir of Predappio. So we are on the hills, at the feet of the Apennine, very close to the border of Tuscany. And so my understanding was that I wanted to continue the tradition of my grandfather, and then my grandmother, great-grandfather and grandmother. And so I decided to go ahead with this indigenous vine. I don't know how this will change in the future, how in the past this autochthon vine adapted. It's difficult to answer for me. I'm not an agronomist. But what I've seen that the timing of harvest is change. The spring is change. I mean, there is no winter. The winter, it's warm now. And so it's very difficult because we have to adapt ourselves with new practice. It's not easy. As Giuseppe was saying, organic maybe it's not anymore. It's old, it's a old practice, but I'm organic. I mean, I started to be organic. I wanted to be organic because I didn't want to use pesticide. So my first goal, I don't want to use chemical fertilizer. I want to preserve the land that I inherit from my family. So it's difficult to answer your question, but I think probably autochthon vine are more keen on their territory, but the climate is changing and we have to adapt with new practice. Do you want to add?
Good evening, everyone. Yes, so it's very wide as a subject, and I think as you said, we're facing actually some very new challenge. It's not only about the drought, it's not only about, it's global warming, and what we was discussing before, it was about more afraid about the spring, about the bad frost, who came up recurrently now. To face that, first, you get the native variety, of course, who are more adapted, and that's even the smart move in the past, especially in Italy, to keep the autochthon, the native grapes, that they did a much better job than in France, for example, to keep the original one. Then, when we're facing new challenge, we have to get more rigorous in our way to think, in our way to act on the agriculture, on the field. So today everything is the weather is more extreme, so we have to take care about the soil. The soil is where it starts, because the vine plant can support easily the high temperature, a lot of rain, except for the disease sometimes, like in last year. But we have really to get focused on the soil about the structure, about the microbiological activity, and what makes the organic matter of the soil. So that's make get more involved in the practice. So before, maybe the past, after the harvest period, everyone, you get out of the vineyard, focused on the winery. Now, after the vineyard, we're seeding weeds in the vineyards, in order to maintain the potential of the soil. So we are on the border of the Calanchi Valley, right in front of Civita di Bagnoregio. It's a volcanic soil, very unique in the wine world. There is a lot of it in Italy, but just a few volcanic spots in the wine world. And it's kind of unique. You got unicity. And sustainability is not only about being labeled as organic, regenerative farming, we heard before, permaculture, biodynamic. That's, it's up to the situation. It's up, not about the skill, but the situation, the topography, the objective you want. Our goal is to make healthy wine. But some healthy wine, we got an identity, and the identity is coming from soil. So again, it's all what we're facing, what the challenge in front of us will be first managed by the soil. If you don't want to change the variety with our identity. So we're making French varieties, some native variety like the Gregetto, Trebbiano, and we see the difference when it came extreme, when the hot summer or the bad frost. You know, the Gregetto got a bigger, thicker skin, get a better resistance to the first fog to reach the full maturity. So that's the way, you know. Like they used to say before, we're going back on the basic. And we used to get too far in the practice, in the industrial farming, and we lost a lot of biodiversity, excuse me, and now we're trying to fight back and bring that biodiversity again, and that will help us to fight the global warming.
Yeah, I think the biodiversity it's a key of help the practice. So spontaneous cultivation, so connect the forest. So if you have a crop forest close to the vineyard, this will help, like in a holistic way, to be more resistant. So this is very important.
And we were talking earlier a little bit about consumer demand and, of course, the trends of organic, biodynamic, natural wines, because ultimately these wines end up on our dinner tables in happy and delicious occasions. So how do you, Alice, as someone who works more on the communications and marketing side of the business, do you engage with your consumers to raise awareness about the importance of sustainable wine production in the face of climate change, and the work that you do?
Hi, good evening. Noelia Ricci is a kind of new project because we started in 2013. And when we started, we think about how we can create our identity and to be our identity, to be unique, and to communicate something about our labels, our boxes. So we decided to represent in our labels the natural science and animals that for us were compliant to our vineyards. So we play, a bit. We discover an ancient archive of natural science, and we decide to communicate about these images. So we pick one animal for each wine, and that for us has a particular meaning. For example, we pick a monkey for our Gaudens, our Sangiovese Predappia, our Cru. But the Gaudens, of course, is not leaving the vineyard, but for us was the meaning of come back to the origin of how farmers produce Sangiovese in Predappio. So we pick the animal that represents the origin of human being to communicate a wine that wants to come back to the origin. That is one of the topics, even now, how to come back to the origin, recover the origin of how farmers make Sangiovese in that area. And then we pick another animal that is the wasp for our other Sangiovese. The wasp that is an animal that is linked to the vineyard because during the harvest there are wasps around and protect the biodiversity. And then the whale for our Trebbiano, our white wine, to remind that millions of years ago, that land that are in Predappio were covered by the sea. And of course was an homage even to a tribute to the dream, so concept to the dream, the imagination, to even the whale of Fellini, that is one of the most important Italian filmmaker and is from Romagna too. So this is just a little example of how we decide to communicate even with the image we pick for build our identity. We decide to put inside our box of wines that are in paper and not in wood, even for a sustainability practice. We put the butterflies inside the box. So this is our, little way to communicate our attitude for make wines. So of course, from the winter 2021, we became organic, as Marco told, and now the leaf of the organic is on the label. But as Sergio told, it's just one thing. So now to be certified organic is not the reply, but is one thing that wine producer can do. But to consider the vineyard as a culture in your estate, in your project. So we try to maintain a percentage of spontaneous and cultivated. We try to maintain as much as we can all the trees around the vineyards to change the culture of wheat, for example, to nourish the ground close to the vineyards. So to have an approach more holistic to this, and to communicate even to our consumers through social or website, this what we are doing, and even the big effort that in these last 5 years is back to our work.
About the abandon of the organic. Of course, a farm that has 30 years of experience in organic cultivation doesn't abandon this experience, but put the experience in a new idea of sustainability. So the organic is part of a new way to be modern and to be sustainable. And so we have to continue our organic cultivation, of course, because it's part of the defense of the soil, but it's not enough. So it's not now our role, complete our role to be only organic. We listen a lot of different persons. I think the message is this. It's not enough to be defensor of our soil. We have to be company, farmer, in a community, in a social community, and that has other role, other duty for everybody.
Yeah, it's very challenging. No, because we were talking before, as I say to Giuseppe, we are organic, but he is organic since 30 years, and it was interesting to understand this idea that the organic is not anymore enough, but we have to see the big picture, and sustainability is not just environmentally speaking, but it's socially, it's economically, so it's a large topic. And for us, it's very challenging because we are facing very hard times. But I think it's our duty, and also we have to put our step, as Christina was saying before, so we have to do our part as much as possible, of course. And so I'm very happy to reach this milestone of organic, but I'm understanding what you say. And of course, we started also with renewable energy, recycling also organic waste from the cellar. No, we build a station mixed with manure to fertilize the land. All these things are little step, little that help to have a vision, and so we are looking forward to go ahead in this way.
I'm wondering how many people here have thought about hybrids, otherwise known as PVs, and is it something that you're considering in the future, experiments, also changing pruning techniques? And historically, there was really lousy rootstock in the 80s and 90s, and changing over rootstock to be able to deal with climate change.
Thank you for the question. And we were talking about that just before, and I was saying that about the varieties, still finding some new clone.
Yes, the question was about in the face of climate change, how many of the panelists are thinking about the possibility of using the PVs, otherwise known in America as hybrid grapes, changing rootstock that historically has been really bad in the 80s and 90s, and there are a lot of rootstocks that can be drought resistant that help the local varieties to continue. And there's a lot of work that can be done with pruning to help with natural disasters such as frosts, et cetera, et cetera. So there are all sorts of things here that we can use for climate change, which is here with us and is devastating in the vineyard. So I'm just wondering where we are with that.
Sure, no, that's very interesting. And so first about the vine plant, it's a clone graft on the rootstock with the American rootstock. And you're completely right saying that the rootstock multiplication, researching to facing now the global warming stopped by the 80s, even maybe early 90s. So we still have the rootstock that we had 30 years ago. That's a point, that's a big problem. And I talked a few weeks ago with pepinerists who producing the plant, and they say we are limited now. Not about the variety, not about the clone, because they're still searching for new clone of Sangiovese, new clones by crossing, I'm meaning, and that's to have maybe larger grapes, so you got less rot, different, or the plant can be vigorous or less vigorous, but the rootstock stays still the same. So the base on the culture this is a problem. About the hybrids, it's what we call the resistant variety. Personally, I don't think it's the way we have take, especially. Maybe don't get hurt anybody, but in Europe, where the wine culture is so deep, is so important for us, that if you're looking, it came in France, we got, instead of the Merlot, we got the Petit Merlot. Instead of the Sauvignon, we got the Sauvignon. I mean, I'm okay. I mean, everyone got his own reality, but where are we going? What kind of wine is that variety going to be? And we don't have an idea, and you know that wine is a large scale. It's not about what kind of wine will be in 6 months. No, about a lifetime, about in the next 40 years. So I don't think it's more about more skills on managing the soil, getting more involved in the soil, as I said before, and just managing the canopy. That's about then about the pruning. Pruning is you can make a late prune for avoiding the late bad frost, but that it's just in a certain reality. We got quite large vineyards, about 30 hectares, so it's still family size, but we cannot start late to avoid the frost because we got time to respect. And so on that, it's more about the case of everyone. And then the pruning system is more about how the plant is balanced, about the lymph circulation. So like the Guio, the two new cane is still the best balanced pruning system that we know to keep going the vines, because when you plant vineyards, it's not for 20 years, it's not for 40 years, it's for 60, at least 60, 80 years. So the pruning system is very important, but it's not the first one to make a change on the global warming. But the rootstock is a real problem.
So about the new variety, I want only to think about another side of the problem. The other side is that we have to do quality wine. And to do a quality wine, we have to create an identity in our wine. Identity is we have to tell, a glass of our wine have to tell about the land, about the variety. So when we gain this, maybe we need 2 generations, 3 generations, it's not only one year. When we get this, this is our richness. And so it's difficult to completely destroy this richness. And if we taste a Chardonnay from Burgundy, we say this is Burgundy, because we recognize in the wine the terroir. And we want to make the same with our area. We want that in the future, when you taste a white or a red from Tuscia, you say, this is Tuscia. But to arrive at this kind of specialization of quality, we need time. And so it's difficult to change completely. And we have to know about our future, about our quality. And so for this, we work with even for this, we work with indigenous grape.
Yeah, I agree with Giuseppe. I inherit the vineyard of my family that they were 20 years old. And it's like a maturation of the vineyard. So thinking of changing this now, it's too hard. Because I wanted to focus on this Sangiovese, that is the indigenous vine of Predappio, to find the quality of this grape and also to have an identity. So we work a lot on that. I think Italy has a great biodiversity, and this is a rich things that we have to preserve. So I think it's difficult to change just because the climate is changing. So we have to be prudent, and of course we have to take care of our soil by management practice like green manure. So monitoring is very important because we have to reach the signal from the plant. So we have to make the plant more resistant. So this is our work, our goal, and we will see how it will go.
Well, I'm wondering now if we want to open, since we've had our first question, questions from the audience as well. If there's anybody.
May I just say, as a wine drinker, just keep going.
Thank you. We keep going for you. No, and this is, I really like what they said before about the lunch that they feed your body and your soul. And it's, I mean, it starts maybe with the wine, without, and when you're saying about sustainability, it's not about the way you're producing, because at the end, to be honest, you want the wine consumer want a pleasant wine. If you can have an identity, if you can have a past, a story, that's even better. But now it's even about how healthy is the wine, because wine, we are organic. Now we are on the certification, but it's more than 10 years that we are organic without any certification, because as I said, we are on the border of the valley, Calanqui Valley, and it's not even a job, it's a responsibility for us to keep, I say, the potential of the soil, but the area. And then when we're going on this thinking is about then drinking the most healthy wine and a true wine, what I call a true wine, with the expression of the soil, the terroir, but then how the vinification take place. So when you're looking, the wine is 82% of water, 14% of alcohol. It lasts, let's say, 6%. 4%, and it's when it's well made, when it's really you put your heart and your soul in the wine, it's just like an elixir. It's based on minerals, vitamins, and salty. So on that way, you're feeding your soul, you're feeding your body, and it's not like you're drinking alcohol or drinking you want to party. It's about our culture, and we're going back on the sustainability made, and what it's a bit ironic, say we're going back to the practice by the 80s because the chemical just kills everything. You know, it was very tough in the past. It went too easy now. And the people used to live longer because of the food, the kilometer zero, what we bring back together, the farmers, people used to live longer because they used to eat well, to drink healthy wines, healthy beverage. And we're just going back on this because we know now with all the frenetic society we are, that we have to take care of us, and that is going through the food and the beverage. So that's really the sustainability. And at the end, we all want to produce the healthiest wine, the healthiest food, the healthiest plate. So we are not going to spray and destroy the environment. It's just if we need some, as we say, to face the global warming. But at the end, the goal is to make the most identity, the most healthy wine, a true wine at the end.
Well, we still have a little bit of time, so if there are no questions, I'm sorry. I'm just still curious a little bit about the technicalities of some of the wine as someone who loves it and doesn't get to go in the vineyards as much. So we talked a lot about the organic farming practices and sustainability. Can you give some examples maybe of like what kinds of techniques, new technologies, innovations that you're implementing in your farms?
One of the conditions of the organic cultivation, of course, is not to use chemical products. So what we can use in the organic cultivation? Usually we use only copper. Copper is considered a natural product, and so we spray copper, especially for fight one of the most important disease of the vineyard is the mildew, the downy mildew. Okay. But the copper has a problem. As a problem is a heavy metal, so stay in the ground. So the new research in the organic cultivation they are finding a new product, organic product that can avoid the use of copper. And for example, in my farmer is 40 years now that we use 4 years that we use tannin of chestnut. The chestnut tannin it's incredible how the chestnut tannin has the same effect of the copper, but is organic 100%. So we have avoided the use of the copper in our land. But there is a problem now that after 5 years of using this tannin, the efficiency of the product is decreasing. And so we have to find something else because it's not enough. And this is the problem of the vines, but of the farming in general, that not only one molecule is enough, you have to change. Because if you change and you mix different molecules, you have always a good degree of efficiency of our farming. So you have always to study, to involve in the farming, because nothing is done, okay, even in the organic cultivation.
we use sulfur and copper. I'm a bad guy. But it's the only way I found out so far. We decided to use a meteo station, so it's not very innovative, but it's something that helps you to control the vineyard. We have 37 vines, so it's big. So it's difficult to control of the vineyard, and the meteo station with some relevator help you to understand the rain, the humidity, and so maybe to enter in the field with more reactive. So this is, I think, it's one way to preserve, it's monitoring the field. And in the cellar, no innovation. We are very traditional, very artisanal. So we do spontaneous fermentation. Then, so we follow. So we don't move the wine. Sometimes we filter. Sometimes it depends. It depends because it depends of the vintage. So we don't have a protocol. We see how the grape it is, and we go ahead. So I think. No, I think this is.
I think we always have to consider that the wine is not a natural product.
Yeah.
So we need technology to make wine. So an important professor from enology professor of the University of Milan, he said that the wine is an intermediate phase between a grape and a vinegar.
Yeah.
And so we have understand which is our limit between the two opposites. And so we need technology. So when we talk about natural wine, we have to know about what we are talking.
Yeah.
So there is no natural wine, as there is no natural cheese, as the same thing.
Yeah, this is a topic very natural wine. It's a big topic.
Do you have any final words before we head upstairs to dinner?
It was very interesting to have this debate, and so thank you very much for this invitation. I hope you enjoy, and so we'll be upstairs to serve our wine.
I want to thank everyone for being here. I am going to ask one final question of our winemakers because I am one of those Asian Americans that cannot drink wine because I actually turn bright red when I do. So for vanity's sake, I do not drink. However, I have a husband who really loves wine and so drinks by himself. And so in the United States, we have these quizzes when you go to university about are you an alcoholic, right? And number one is, do you drink every night? And my husband is there going, oh crap, I drink every night. And the second question is, do you drink alone? Well, I don't drink. So he's like, oh crap, I drink alone, right? Like, number three, do you feel like you're missing something from your meal if you're not drinking? He's like, oh crap, I feel like I'm missing something if I'm not drinking from a meal. Wine drinking has become extremely popular. There's been a renaissance of wine, of enjoying wine. But it hasn't happened, I think, in Italy in the same way that it's happening globally. So for instance, I'm a historian of pop culture. If you watch TV shows in the United States, virtually every TV show, instead of having the Manhattan, like Sex and the City, they're now drinking beautiful glasses of Pinot Noir, right? Or Pinot Grigio. And they're talking much more about wine. Or, for instance, in the 90s, there was a move towards wine to East Asia. And there was a lot of concern about these beautiful wines that were going to Asia and being mixed with, horror of horrors, Coca-Cola, right? So in talking about this issue of sustainability and talking about the ways in which you're protecting the soil, but talking about the heritage of your vines, how do you connect that and negotiate with the fact that many of the wines that are being grown in Italy, produced in Italy, bottled in Italy, are now being shipped across to the United States? Or being shipped to Taiwan, or being shipped to Korea? how do you connect sustainability with profitability that makes what you are doing actually possible?
No alcoholic wine. The problem is we have not to call wine a non-alcoholic wine. It's another beverage. So this is the problem. This is a European problem because it's a European legislation, this even. And for me, it's not correct to call wine this. It's another beverage. Of course, they have a right to stay in the market, of course, but it's not wine. Wine is an alcoholic beverage. And it's important because it's the socialization of the people in the story of the world, of the human beings. It's the socialization of the people. And we consider, in Italy, we consider wine this. A kind to stay together, to pair it with food, but always with someone. It's not something that we drink alone. Usually something to stay together. And the best way to socialize, sorry, my English. And for this, that from many centuries, for every year, we continue to drink wine.
Yeah. Hello. Thank you, Alisa, for bringing up the subject of wine. I would like to say, I was 10 years old. I grew up in Rome, I'm Italian, but I live in New York. I was 10 years old, and my father, he said, "You are not drinking wine? Not yet? What's wrong with you?" We always had a glass of wine for lunch and dinner. He added a little water for me and my sister, but wine was mandatory. Now, when I see not only American tourists, but foreigners from all over the world coming to Italy and having cappuccino with pasta or pizza, it makes me sick. Makes me sick. We have to teach, we Italians have to inform, foreigners don't know, we have to inform them that you must have a glass of wine. A glass of wine a day keeps the doctor away.
Yes, exactly. Wine is part of our culture. So it's kind of food. In each table in Italy, probably more before in the past, there was food and wine. Always. At lunch, at dinner, a little bit probably, but wine and food. So are strictly connected. I mean, in each region, sometimes it's in each province, in each part of the region, there are its wines with the typical food. And they are related, they are connected. So, for example, in Romagna, they used to drink Sangiovese, and the food is connected with the Sangiovese wine. So they go together. So we have to probably reconsider this aspect and bring it around the world, because it's very important. It's our culture.
Which brings it to the title of the seminar, which is Pairings, right? Food and wine, right? Progress and tradition, right? Bringing these things together because they're always in conversation with one another. And while I agree, Alice, that food and wine have been connected, and oftentimes you know exactly what type of wine goes with what food, also vineyards have been really pushing, and sommeliers have been pushing uncommon pairings, right? Things, red wine with fish, with Josetta was never heard of before, right? Never, right? Or certain types of aromatic wines with Chinese food, right? Or certain types of whites with sushi, right? And so there's other ways of doing pairings that I think are challenging our vintners, are challenging our drinkers, but are also challenging families to reconsider, what does it mean? Are young people in Italy still drinking wine? Or are they drinking more beer? Are they drinking more cocktails? What has happened to that tradition of being 10 years old and being offered a little glass of wine, perhaps watered down slightly, but maybe not even so much, so that we grow up with the tradition that it is always paired together and it is part of the conversation and part of the culture?
So I think first we have to consider that the alcohol during the wine, basically during this food during the day, was much more by the repression we got about drunk driving. Was much more. I think if I don't get wrong, 20, 30 years ago in Italy, you didn't have any alcohol limits in the driving the car. So I come here too late, and but. That's the thing is there is a recent study about the wine world and the young people, because we're talking about that. And one of the reasons the young people are afraid of going in the wine world is, first, it looks too complicated. Too many wines, too many regions, too many accessibility. That's what we love, the wine world. That because we can have everything could be satisfied, every taste. The other thing is that they are afraid of talking about the wine, because one of the most difficult thing in the tasting is putting the words of what you feel. So that's really what we training from the beginning. And then it was just about the communication. We are that's our fault about how we communicated, even about let's say when you say a little bit of settlement at the end of at the bottom of the bottle. Now a lot of people are there. What? It's acceptable to have a deposit settled in the. No, it's just that we had a lack of communication to say that at the beginning, in the past, to say, if you see that, that's because the wine is not treated. It's not a problem. It will not touch the quality of the wine. It will not change the flavors. It will not change the texture. It's just a matter of physics. It's a precipitation due to the cold temperature. And then I have to say that the beer world did a fantastic job about the advertising. If you think about the beer, I love the beer too. I'm drinking only fermented beverage, wine, grappa, beer. So it's the healthiest one. But the beer, when you think about the beer world back in the 30 years, 40 years, it was so poor, so annoying. You just got the big brand that was it. Now you got a full world of color. I mean, any kind of, especially around us in Lazio, in the Viterbese, in every part. And I mean, they put color on the label, new taste. There wasn't blocked by the fence of the culture. I say we got a heavy culture, fortunately, we got in Europe, but sometimes, it's quite heavy, and it's not allowed you to move forward. New labels like Australian or American make they are crazy sometimes about the labels. But I mean, one of the best Syrah in Australia, where I used to work there, the label was the woman who shoots the lunch. It's a woman, it's a weapon. So the independent woman who going to looking for their own meal, and that was the Syrah of the year in Australia. So putting that could be a lot of controversy here, but that makes that young people are a bit annoyed by the wine world, and they don't get the flavors, what we like in the wine. So we need to attract them by easy message, easy wine at the first, then they're going to get to the more complex wine, but that makes them easy. And then once they get in, they're just getting more and more interested, more and more taken by the beauty of the wine world.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to communicate wine, also because a consumer, they don't know about the value of the wine. So this is a very big topic. And for us, when we started, was the first goal. So how we are going to communicate our wine, our identity. You have just the bottle, no? So you have to dress the bottle and say something, communicate something, try to reach the consumer. But this is very difficult. So this is why we choose I choose the name of my grandmother, Noelia Ricci, so just to give an identity of a family identity. Then we put an animal, an insect that has a meaning, But yeah, this is very difficult, and I've seen the new generation are like when they go to the restaurant, they want to take the responsibility to get the wine, because it's difficult to choose. You have to be passionate, or you have to have a knowledge, you know. And so this is also for us very interesting, how to communicate wine.
So part of that education is going to happen upstairs now, because we invite you all to join us in Pairings. I hope what you've learned today is that in education, in communication, in conversation, we can actually begin to have really substantive solutions, find substantive solutions, ask substantive questions about how we move forward. I hope also what you see today is that these three winemakers are actually working in collaboration with one another. They may be in competition in the market, but they are actually cooperating in order to make better wines, to be more responsible to our Mother Earth, and to create better product for us to enjoy. At the American Academy, we believe very seriously in pairings. We believe in food and wine, believe in progress and tradition. We believe in the arts and the humanities. We believe in the American Academy, and we believe in Rome. Most of all, we believe in a very, very good time in conversation and collaboration. Please join us upstairs, and please join me in thanking our winemakers tonight.
Since my wife is not coming, I would give somebody the opportunity to join us on the conversation, somebody who doesn't have the ticket for the meal. I can offer one meal that my wife is not coming, so I have...
Oh, that's very kind of you.
So